This week's topic is about planning our project. Now, first, hopefully we've all gotten in our groups. We kind of maybe have an idea of what our target audience is, maybe what organization or group we're planning to work with. And so now we actually have to plan out what we're going to do. So today we're going to talk about making sure we really understand some basic principles of project management and how to set an appropriate goal. We want to learn how to really structure a timeline for our project as well as assign roles to people in our group. And then we want to learn how to prepare a draft project outline. For your project, you'll be drafting a project outline, which I will talk about in a little bit more detail in class. But this is really going to help you outline the milestones, the steps, the roles, everything you're going to need to do this term to actually be successful with your project. So, planning is really important when we are doing a project. It really helps to make sure that everyone in the group is clear on what the project's about and what our goal is. It makes sure that we are focused on what that goal is, and it really is going to help to avoid confusion. If we don't plan things out well and we don't have a very clear outline, people don't know what their responsibilities are, and that's going to lead to missed deadlines and frustrations and ultimately not a successful project. Planning helps to really promote effective time management. It makes us all stay on schedule. We're going to use our resources wisely. Planning is going to help us reduce misunderstandings. It's going to help enhance teamwork overall within the group. Even if we maybe all don't agree on an aspect of our project, we've talked about it, we've communicated it, we've come to some sort of a consensus about what the best thing is for the group and for the target audience. And even if we don't fully agree with it, we're all on the same page. And then also, planning is going to increase the likelihood of project success. If we plan our project out well, we are more likely to achieve our objectives and do them on time. So, some basic principles of project planning: we always want to make sure we have very clear goals. For your project, I would just say have one really clear goal. So, it's what do you want to achieve by doing this project? Whenever we make a goal, the best goals are what we call SMART goals. That means that the goals are specific, they're measurable, they're achievable, they're relevant, and then they are time bound. So, an example would be we are going to create a 10-minute educational presentation on proper brushing techniques for fifth graders by week 8. So, one, it is specific. So, what are we doing? We are going to create a presentation. It's going to be 10 minutes long. It's going to be about proper brushing technique. It's measurable. So, creating a proper brushing technique or a presentation on proper brushing technique for the fifth graders, that is measurable. Like, we could do a pre-test and a post-test at a presentation. We could see if the students know how to brush their teeth appropriately, and then at the end we could quiz them again and see have they learned anything. So we can measure how many students were able to do this. Did we achieve our goal? Achievable. So we've got fifth graders. Yeah, we can probably teach them in 10 minutes proper brushing technique. So that's an achievable goal. Relevant. Is this relevant? Absolutely. So one, it's relevant to the class because we're teaching brushing technique, and this is a class about oral health. We're in an oral health program. And it's also relevant because these are fifth graders, and fifth graders could probably benefit from some proper brushing technique. And then it's time bound. So we're saying that we are going to accomplish this by week 8. So that's what a SMART goal means. So whatever you decide you're going to do, I would run your goal through that SMART goal scenario and say, is it specific? Is it measurable? Is it attainable, relevant, and is it time-based? And then when we are looking at our project, it's best to really break it into phases. So I've kind of already done that for you as far as, when you look at the course calendar in the syllabus and you look at the weekly modules, each week we are kind of talking about a specific part of the project. So I'm kind of trying to help guide you along the way in how to move along a timeline. But first of all, we always want to start with some research. Once we research, we know what we're going to do, we know our audience, then we can do some material development, whether that's a slide deck, whether that is brochures, whether it is coming up with, any kind of materials that you're planning. If you're going to build a game that you're going to play with your target audience, that's material development. And then implementation. So actually presenting your project however it is you're going to do it. And then reflection is always that last piece. So, another thing you want to do is you always want to anticipate challenges. So, don't always assume that everything is going to go the way you want. You're going to make your outline for your project, you're going to make a timeline. What if something happens? What if someone's child gets sick on the day of the presentation? What if the place you decided to do your thing at backs out? What if the person who was going to print the brochures didn't get them done? Anticipate some potential things that could go wrong and think about some potential solutions to those problems. So just kind of think about some alternative things so that if you do run into an issue, you're kind of prepared for how you might want to deal with that. So structuring a timeline, very important in any project. So you always want to divide your project into different milestones. And again, I've kind of already done that for you in this class when you look at the course calendar. Here we are, we're in week 3. We're going to draft our project outline. We're going to start gathering some resources. Next week, we should probably be working on developing all of our materials. Weeks 5 and 6, that's probably going to be kind of finalizing things and bringing things together. And then weeks 7 and 8 are probably when you're going to want to actually do your project. After that, that'll be our reflection time. Whenever you're creating a timeline, you always want to build in a little bit of flexibility. There could be potential delays. You might need to adjust some things, based on different situations. So again, that's kind of anticipating potential challenges. You want to make sure you build a little bit of flexibility into that. And then use tools to help track those deadlines. So using something like Google Calendar or Google Workspace, these can help keep everyone organized. At a bare minimum, we are going to be working on our project outline. That's going to include a timeline. And so everybody's going to be able to see and know what that timeline is in your group. And then we want to assign some roles. So really important when we're assigning roles is, what are people good at? What are people's strengths? So some people might have certain skills or certain interests or not. If somebody in your group is really terrible at making PowerPoints, you're not going to put them in charge of making a PowerPoint. Somebody in your group has got to be really into making PowerPoints. That's the person that should probably be in charge of that. Somebody might be really creative and they might be really good at making like a brochure or things like that. Somebody might be super organized and more outgoing, and maybe the person that deals with like organizing with the people that you're going to be working with. And then make sure you're defining those responsibilities pretty clearly. And it doesn't necessarily mean that like one person needs to be in charge of like all of a thing, but know who's going to be working on what. Don't assume everyone's going to be working on the same thing. Kind of delegate who's going to do what. And then make sure you're maintaining accountability. So obviously there is a peer evaluation built into this whole class and this whole project, but you want to maintain accountability while you're working. So make sure and do regular check-ins with your group. If somebody is in charge of something and you haven't heard from them in a while, don't be afraid to ask for progress updates, because ultimately this is the entire group's grade and it reflects on you as a group if the project doesn't do well. We're working with people outside of the college. We're working with different groups. We want to make the best impression we can. So don't be afraid to check in with your group mates to help maintain that accountability. So drafting an outline for your project. When we have a strong outline, it's always going to have an introduction. Who's the target audience? And then what's the need that we've identified for that target audience? What are we really planning to do here? Who are we working with? And then what's the goal? What are we trying to achieve with this project? Next, you want to always talk about the steps that you're going to take, kind of some of those key milestones and things, what resources are required, the deadlines, add all of those things in. And then team roles. So who is going to be responsible for each of those things on the task list? So some common challenges. So first off, some vague or really unrealistic goals. So always make sure whatever you decide your goal is going to be, go back to that SMART framework and look at that and make sure, go through all those steps and make sure your goal meets all of those standards. Poor time management. This one is pretty critical. This class is only 10 weeks long. This is going to go by really fast. So make sure that you have good time management. Break the project up into small weekly tasks and make sure hold people accountable so that everything is staying on task. And then uneven participation. I mean, this is common in all group work situations, is that somebody might be participating more than other people. Somebody might just be a little bit checked out and not participating. Make sure to schedule regular check-ins. We've kind of built that into the class already, so you've got that. And just make sure, don't be afraid to just call people out a little bit if they're not participating fully. So, key takeaways. Successful projects, we got to make sure they have really good goals. The timeline has to be realistic. We want to keep things simple. Don't overcomplicate the project. Make sure that everyone knows what their role is. We want to draft an outline that's going to help us stay very focused. It's going to make sure we all know what our objectives are and when we need to get them done. And then make sure and think about some potential challenges and what you might do if those challenges arise. So, our focus today in class and for our group work time, we are going to begin drafting our project outline. So, this project outline is going to be kind of tied into your discussion post number 3. So, I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail in class, just kind of how this week is structured. But some things you want to think about. What is your project's main goal? What steps are you going to take to achieve that goal and do your project? And how are you going to divide the roles amongst your team members? And then the 2 deliverables you have this week, you've got your project update number 3 and discussion post